ridiculous for me to. Oh, recording in progress.
We are recording. Yes, I just hit record.
She started talking to me. And so I do have videos of people doing things. And so I would like there to be, I mean, I'll have a discussion portion in the beginning. I'll have some examples of things and I want to know how you guys feel about them. And so then we'll kind of launch into some stuff. I don't know if I'll get to the theories today, just with how long I take and how long my voice lasts and, you know, all that good stuff. And so, but I will definitely get over a majority of, you know, what deviance is and things like that. And so, yeah, let me pull my cute little PowerPoint up here.
Is it adorable?
I mean, it's blue.
Okay. Pretty adorable.
And I always use PowerPoint templates, but I saw that there's like a new thing, like Canva. I don't know if it's new. It's
Canva,
new.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ooh, that's got some templates that I haven't used before because I think I've cycled through every PowerPoint template ever. And so, okay, we are talking about deviance in society. So let me, so why is mine not doing presenter view for me? The day that I have notes, right? All right. So did it stop sharing for you guys? Of course it did. Okay. All right, we're just gonna go with it. Okay, so I want you guys to tell me whether you think this is wrong. Does it make you feel uncomfortable? So on Zoom, they had the little hand raise feature. And so instead of having everybody be like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable, right? Like I'll have you guys raise your hand so I can get an idea of where you're at. So we'll go through each of these. These are, oh, go ahead.
Kelly, just before we do that, let's make sure everyone knows how to raise their hand.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. I haven't used that for quite a while. What is it under?
Reactions, maybe?
Reactions. Yes. Okay. Yes. So there should be
Joanne's got a thumbs up. She's like, I got it.
Janice Galley knows what's up. So there are reactions there. So you can have raised hand, which is on the bottom. And I'm assuming you want them to raise their hand if they feel uncomfortable. Is that right?
Yeah, you can use raise your hand, thumbs up, some sort of reaction.
Okay.
I don't have a hands up
Okay.
thing. I have a clap hands, a thumbs up, a heart,
at
crying,
the very
surprise.
Kim, at the very bottom, does it say raise hand of what you're looking at?
No.
Okay. Well, do a thumbs up then. How about that?
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
Yeah, the reactions will probably be best because otherwise I think I have to put everybody's hand down.
Okay. Yeah. So thumbs up.
So if you want a thumbs
under participants, if you want to actually raise hand, it's under participants.
Oh, I see it now. Okay.
Nice. Look at us all learning and helping each other. We've come so
So do you
far.
want us to do that, or do you want us to do a thumbs up on the reactions?
I would say a thumbs up would, or a clappy, or a whatever.
No.
Okay.
Okay, which one means uncomfortable?
What?
What means uncomfortable? What sign means
How
uncomfortable?
about this one?
The thumbs up.
We can do that one. That one can be uncomfortable. Like,
How about the oh?
That one, okay.
Oh.
I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay, we got that. Okay.
All right. So
We're
our
learning
first
Thank you.
example.
Well,
Any
I've
other
learned
questions?
2 other languages. Now we're into number 3, I guess.
Right.
All right.
The emoji language. It's a whole thing.
It is. Yeah.
I can speak only in emojis when I talk to my students sometimes, like, because they'll text me. And it's interesting to try to decide what they're saying. Like, I don't know what the dancing guy and the smiley face and the clap hands all mean together, but oh, now it's in progress. You are standing in an elevator and someone gets in and faces the back of the elevator facing everyone else who is already in. Does this make you guys uncomfortable? Do you feel like it's wrong? For some people, it's just weird, right? Where you're not really uncomfortable, but you're kind of like, what is happening right now, right? All right. Next one. Oops. Someone is driving 60 miles per hour when the speed limit is 55. And by that, I mean, I'm driving 60 next to you, passing you and waving like as you're going 55. All right. Oops. You are interviewing for a position. So you're interviewing the people and someone comes in with purple hair. And this is always funny because a lot of these will depend on generation, how you're raised and positions that you've been in and things like that. And so it's always interesting. And so, okay, next one. You are shopping for a new mattress and you see someone sleeping on top of a bed to test it out. I mean, I've thought about it. Especially if I have a babysitter and I'm like, oh, it's nice and quiet in here, right? The statement, we do it like this because this is how it's always been done, or it's always been done this way. Do you think it's wrong? Does it make you uncomfortable? And then when you help someone and they don't say thank you. All right, so these are all examples of deviant behavior in one way or another. So they make us uncomfortable because we were told at some point, this is not how it's supposed to go, right? This is not the way that you're supposed to do it. Like logically, it might make sense to take a nap on a mattress to test it out, because if you're like, I'm gonna sleep on it, but we've been taught like, hey, you don't fall asleep in public, right? You definitely don't lay on those mattresses more than just like, okay, quick test, right? Like there's almost like an appropriate amount of time that you can spend laying on a mattress, which is different than like if you're buying a chair. Apparently you can sit in the chair for an extended period of time and it's okay. But the mattress, for some reason, when your feet are on things, it can get uncomfortable. And so, okay, so what is deviance? So essentially, deviance is a behavior that violates social norms. So social norms can be either formal or informal. Formal ones would be like laws. So for a lot of people, they don't necessarily get uncomfortable if somebody's driving 60 and a 55, but it is technically violating a law that we have, right? Like, I don't know if any of you have ever been pulled over for a ticket, but they have like, I know I'm not late for everything, but I always feel like I'm late for everything. So I speed everywhere. And so I'm super guilty of that. But the tickets go like 0 to 5 miles per hour, over 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15, I think, and then it's over 15 or over 20. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've been pulled over, so knock on wood over here. But that would involve me leaving the house.
I was just pulled over last week.
Were you?
I was, and I hadn't been pulled over in like 10 years. And I can't believe I didn't get a ticket. Can I just tell you that? I cannot believe I didn't get
Did you just get a warning?
I did. I was going 15 over. Okay, I was going 40 in a residential. It was apparently 25. And I was really rocking out to the radio and I was super hungry and on my way to Panera.
You know, I get that.
I did drop that I was pregnant. I did. I was like, I'm just so hungry.
Was it a guy cop or a girl cop?
It was a man. Yeah.
Oh.
He gave me a warning and I could not believe it. I was like, I literally said to him, I'm surprised. I honestly thought I'd get it.
Right. He's probably like, I had a pregnant wife. Go get your food. Like, I don't want to mess with you right now. But yeah, so it's interesting because there are things that are technically illegal, that are those formal laws, but we socially accept it. So I say that I speed and most people, like, they laugh. My students are like, ah, me too, right? But if I was like, hey, I deal drugs, people wouldn't be like, oh, haha, right? Me too. that's not one of those things that we deem socially acceptable. And so something can be a law and not also be like one of those informal social norms or expectations. The terms that we use are folkways and mores. So a folkway is a custom or belief common to members of a society or culture. So this could, when looking at societies and cultures, the United States as a whole is like a nation, but people in the Midwest are different than people on the East Coast or the West Coast or in the South, right? And so there can be different informal social norms and expectations based on these areas. So if you were to go to the South, everyone is, you know, sir, ma'am, miss, and it's seen as rude if you're not addressing people in that manner, right? Versus it's a little bit more laid back the further west you go, and sometimes kids call their teachers by their first name, right? Like I let my students call me Callie. There are some professors who prefer Dr. whatever or Mrs. whatever, or Mr. whatever. I'm a little bit more casual about it, but it all depends on the environment, right? Like we're at Western Iowa Tech. If I was at Harvard, I don't think that I would allow my students to then be like, hey, Callie, be like, no, we're at Harvard, step it up, right? So these social norms and expectations vary in different areas. So that a more is a way to refer to norms that are widely observed and have great moral significance. So mores include an aversion for societal taboos, such as incest. There are things as a society that we're just like, you know what, we're all in agreement, we're not cool with this, right? Like, and that again depends on the area, right? So for a really long time, marijuana consumption or distribution or whatever was deemed as super taboo. Like you didn't talk about it, you didn't tell anybody that you smoked it, right? But now if you go to places like Washington, Colorado, California, a couple other places, they have dispensaries. Like somebody can literally just walk in and you can buy marijuana that used to be there are, so I'll have a few videos from like the 50s in terms of like socialization for certain things. There's one about marijuana consumption and how it like drives people crazy and they make horrible choices and everything. And so it was a very much like a propaganda scare tactic. And so it's important to note that what's considered deviant can vary from culture to culture, but also through different points in time. So what was seen as illegal or immoral or whatever else in Reefer Madness. Yes, that was the name of it. Thanks, Janice. And it throughout time, things have been either considered more acceptable, less acceptable, depending on who you are, where you are. I had a session on social movements last year. And so it also depends on the social movements that have occurred, right? Like, it was illegal for women to be able to vote until the movements came around, and then it was considered, now it's an expectation. Like, what do you mean women couldn't vote, right? Like younger generations have no idea, like it's never impacted them the same way as someone who was either living through it or lived shortly after it, right? And so I also have stigma on here because it's really important to discuss like when people get these mark of disgrace, you could say, it sticks with them. So if they do a deviant behavior or go against, excuse me, social norms at a certain point, whether they're a bad teenager, sometimes that can stick with them, especially in areas like Sioux City where everyone knows everybody and you can't go, if you graduated high school in Sioux City, you can't, you know, go a week and a half without seeing somebody that you went to high school with, right? Like it's, and so sometimes people can carry that around with them. Oops. And so a taboo is a strong social form of behavior that is considered to be deviant by a majority of individuals in society. So that ties back to those mores, and it can either be formal or informal deviance, but it's most often closely tied with the formal. So people aren't necessarily deemed to be like, things aren't necessarily taboo. Like if they're considered to be taboo, odds are pretty good that they have become law, or there has been some regulation set in place saying that society is not okay with it, right? Like if we're looking at things like I have incest as an example, or rape, right? Where society is like, yeah, we're not okay with this, to the point that we want this to be a law. We want it to be understood that we're not okay with it, and a punishment should come from it, right? And so obviously that's the difference between informal and formal, where informal is like you get a social consequence, right? Maybe people don't hire you, or they're looking at you differently, versus formal, where there might be a consequence of jail time or a fine or something that's then on your record, right? Unless you take a stop class and then it's not on your record, like that one speeding ticket that I had, right? I've only gotten pulled over one time, and that was in college over a decade ago. So I keep knocking on wood, but of course I have to leave the house to be able to get a ticket. All right. So deviant then and acceptable-ish now. So I have the ish because this is going to depend on who you are, where you're from, generation you're raised in. Things have a tendency, like, so this next generation that's coming up, the Zoomers or Generation Z or whatever we call them, they are pretty much okay with most things. Like it seems like there's not a whole lot of you can't do that compared to how it used to be. But let me show a quick video of some examples of people behaving in some deviant ways. So this is a project that some students did. These were not my students, but I was thinking about having my students do something like this. Oops. All right, I can only exit minimal video. Okay, there we go. There we go. So these students, their assignment was essentially to do things that were informally against like the social norms. And so they didn't do anything illegal. They didn't do anything like that, but it may be seen as like immoral, or normal people would be like, what? Right? So these might make you feel uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable watching them. I'm like, oh, no, don't do that. Right? But we'll just go for it. Can you guys hear that?
It's pretty soft.
I mean, it's just music in the background. They're not talking or anything.
Yep.
And they're marking people's reactions to it. He was not actually peeing. It was a water bottle, just FYI.
Yeah, like that didn't work. definitely. All right, no problem. Y'all enjoy your day now. You too.
You too.
What do you guys think? I can say as a mom, I would probably hold that book. Like if someone asked me, I'd be like, sure. And I'd kind of like hang out, but some of the other ones would be weird.
Yeah, the one that made me the most uncomfortable was the escalator. And actually, no, the park bench. The park bench made
Yeah.
me
Oh,
probably the most uncomfortable. Yeah.
I think
Well, I
some
like-
of them, I probably would have just done what the other, like step over or step around the lady thinking, okay, this is some kid trying to get some attention, you know, trying to be funny kind of thing. And I probably just would have walked around them.
I like the one where they were playing patty cake in the other people's space. I thought that they were intruding into the other people's space, and the child actually said, "Can you stop that, please?" Actually, you know.
I think she said, can you shut up, please?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
It was one of those like, you're telling someone to shut up, but also like, please.
Yeah, but my point is that the younger person was saying how she felt because they had violated a rule we have that's not written down, that you don't get into another person's space. I can get into my wife's space, but I can't get into your space like that.
Right, right.
But really, the one that struck me most was the kid that was pretending to be urinating out there against the wall. That's probably, all the others were kind of funny to me, you know, but that I thought, well, no, that's really not a good thing because it violates not just our social mores, but public health.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
We got into all this in Vietnam too, because they have different unwritten rules than we do, which include both language and touching. Like I could touch a soldier's knee, but I could not touch his head unless I wanted trouble. And when one of them wanted to kick a can off my head, I disciplined him because I knew he had violated their rules.
Mhm.
I just want to say, Joyce let you keep your hand on her head for such a long time. I never would have been like, stop.
Like, okay, honey, okay.
This
We've
is
been married for over 50 years, so.
She's a very nice person.
And it depends on your relationship with the person, right? Like, imagine walking up to a stranger. Like, if Bob was talking and he set his hand on a stranger's head, that stranger would be like, and it depends. Like, when people are very socialized to not make other people uncomfortable, to do what they're supposed to do, like they're willing to tolerate more from other individuals. And so there's definitely been a push recently to say to particularly women and girls, like, it's okay to not let people say things, do things. Like, you don't have to keep quiet for someone else to be comfortable. But for a long time, like, men, women, or otherwise, particularly women, like, you wanted to be seen as the good girl, the nice girl. You didn't want to rock the boat or be outspoken or anything like that, because it was seen as deviant, right? And so thinking about how we learn these things. So how do we learn what our norms are in society? Like, did someone set you down and we're like, okay, so do not lay down at the end of an escalator, right? I would be like, when I saw that, I was uncomfortable because one of them had their hair down, one of the girls did. And I was like, oh, if their hair, like if it gets too close and it gets caught up in it, like that's probably what made me the most uncomfortable, was like the fact that she was about to be in danger if something went wrong.
She was gonna get kicked. That was
Yeah.
that was my concern, that somebody would just kick her. Like, whatever, I'm gonna walk over and if my foot gets you, my foot gets you, you know?
Right. Fighting deviance with deviance, right? Like, some people are like, oh, well, if they're doing something outside the social norm, I can, respond to that with something outside the social norm. But we learn a lot of these things through the socialization of our family, through media, through school, all of these, they're called agents of socialization, right? We don't have videos today teaching us how we're supposed to act, but they used to. So here's a fun little video from the 1950s. It's a little bit longer. I have two from the 1950s because why not, right? This is an educational film on how to attend parties, which I feel honestly like kids should watch today.
We'll have to finish the game tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow? I'm going to Mary's party tomorrow, aren't you?
A party? Why, I didn't even... No, I don't like parties. I never have any fun at parties.
I was kind of hoping you'd go. Parties are more fun when all your friends are there.
Cindy!
Well, I better go. I'll see you. Here's your ball.
Mother, why do you suppose Mary didn't invite me to her party?
Are you sure you didn't get an invitation?
Maybe they thought I wouldn't want to go to a party. They probably thought I wouldn't know how to act.
Hey, now, your name's Cindy, not Cinderella. You will get an invitation to the party. There's just been some mix-up. Wait and see.
Oh, it's not important anyhow. Good night, Mother.
Good night, Cindy. Your name's Cindy, not Cinderella. You go to the party. You go to the party.
Cindy. Cindy. Wake up, Cindy. What? Who's there? I don't see anybody.
Of course you didn't. I'm not just anybody. I'm your fairy godmother.
Sure.
You don't believe me? Well, that's up to you. I just thought you might want to go to that party.
Oh, I do.
We've got some work to do. We've got to get you ready.
Oh, but I wasn't invited to the party. They probably thought I'd rather play basketball or go fishing or...
Well, you've been invited, all right. I've seen to that. And I'm going with you. But you mustn't tell anyone.
Not even Dennis?
Well, maybe we'd better tell Dennis. I have a feeling he's going to need my help, too. But hurry up or you'll be late.
The party isn't until this afternoon.
It is this afternoon. Now hurry up, out of bed. Oh, what a mess. Oh, well, that's why I had the magic wand. Ready?
Oh, but this isn't my very best dress.
Oh, now look. You're not going to the party to show off your clothes, but you should be clean and neat when you go to the party. You better hurry now. We don't want to be late. Ready? Here we go to Mary. Here we are.
Oh, I hope everyone is already here. I hate to be the first one.
I don't blame you. No one likes to sit and wait for a party to start. And the party can't really get going until everyone arrives. So whenever you go to a party, Cindy, always be on time. And when the clock says it's time to go home, be sure to leave on time. That's important.
Will my clothes turn like Cinderella?
Oh, no. But you can spoil the fun of a party if you try to make it last too long so that everyone gets tired and bored.
Come on, Janet. Oh, look, here comes some of the others now. We're all getting here at the same time. Where'd you go?
Hi, Cindy. Who are you talking to?
Oh, no, I was just thinking out loud, I guess. Hi, Janet. Hi, Cindy and Bill for Daddy to come. Good to live you.
Cindy,
Well, hi, Dennis.
I thought you weren't coming to the party.
I wasn't, but you'll see her, then you'll understand.
See her? See who?
See me.
What?
She's going to help us enjoy the party.
You are?
Certainly. See, they're setting up for a game of musical chairs.
Ah, but I don't like to.
There. That's the way to have fun at a party. Join in the game. A party calls for teamwork. Why, nobody will have any fun unless everyone joins in. So join in wholeheartedly in any game suggested, and you'll all have a lot more fun.
Everybody get up.
Oops. Remember now. Don't be too noisy or rough. And don't break things.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, you lost your chair, too. You're out of the game. That's what you get for bumping into things.
Oh, she's only kidding.
I know, but don't tease or make fun of others. Not even your very best friends. They might not understand. Why, if they thought you were serious, their feelings would be hurt. And then neither of you would have any fun. Now, would you?
All right, Fairy Godmother. Uh-oh, the music's starting.
What do I do?
Why, just what you have been doing. Obey the rules of the game and be a good loser. Bye now.
Stand up.
Come on, Cindy.
Come on. Come on, Cindy. Come on. Come on.
No, you beat me.
It's a tie.
Hey, that was fun. Actually, you won.
Sure she did. But here, Cindy, you show him what I whispered in your ear. Just as I sat down in the chair, she said, be a good winner. And she was. See how much fun it is when you join in the games in the right ways?
I just hope I can remember the right ways you've shown us.
That's easy. Just remember your manners. Be polite. And above all, be considerate of others. So have fun together.
Come on, you guys, we've got another game. Hey, come on, let's go. Come on, over here, let's go. Come on. Here, Cindy. Here, Dennis.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you, Mary. Where? Here I am. Wait a minute. Don't write anything. I bet I know what you were going to tell us. Remember our table manners when eating. Oh, now you spoiled my fun. I wanted to write it for you. Now you won't think I've been any help to you. Oh, you've been a big help, Fairy Godmother. I've enjoyed the party. So go ahead and write it for us if you want to.
Sure, we want you to write it for us.
You do? May I? Remember your table manners. You didn't really need my help. You knew it already. I guess you don't need me anymore. I may as well be going. Oh, no. Oh, yes. You can't see or hear fairies unless you need them. And you don't need me anymore. But you will remember to leave on time, won't you? And you'll remember to thank the hostess. And whenever we go to any more parties, we'll remember to be clean and neat and to be on time.
And we'll be considerate of others, too. We'll join in the games.
And to obey the rules.
And make fun for everybody, not fun of anybody. Or be too noisy or too rough.
And we'll remember our table manners when eating. You'll always have fun then. Because parties are fun when everyone is considerate of others. Goodbye now. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go.
Cindy,
Don't go.
wake up, Cindy.
Oh, Mother, I just dreamed that.
Cindy, here's Mary's sister Nancy. She just came by to tell you that she was supposed to deliver your invitation to Mary's party 3 days ago, but she forgot. Wasn't it nice of her to come by so early this morning to tell you about it?
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
So what did we learn? Are we all ready to go to a party now?
Oh, yeah.
Well, truthfully, those were very, very good rules. Those are good things to know. Things to
They're
do.
rules that make us comfortable, that's for sure.
Well, if you go to a party and you break things, and I mean, we're not. Truthfully, I never even did that when I was in college. I wouldn't have done that. And be obnoxious. You're not going to be invited to the next party.
Yeah.
I honestly, I love that it was like leave on time, because one of my biggest pet peeves in life is when people will not leave your party.
Yes.
Just leave and let me go to bed.
You go, yeah, I still got to clean a mess up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I disagree with you. The kids today have a lot of rules that they go by. They have a lot of rules. And there are videos, they're on TV all the time, that tell you what's right and what's wrong. They're just different.
It's interesting because, like, I have a toddler. She's 18 months. So, like, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is the new Mr. Rogers.
Yep.
And so when they're younger, there's a lot of that stuff. But at least it seems to me, with what I've watched with my 13-year-old, that after the age of like 7, there's not a whole lot of like wholesome, you could say, like TV shows that are teaching some of those same morals and things like that. So it's like, this was geared towards, I would say 8 and older, right? Like how to go to a party, how to socialize with others. When really we get a lot of that for our younger kids now, like we all grew up with Sesame Street. Sesame Street's been around for, I don't know, I want to say like 75 years. I don't know how long it actually has been. I want to say
I think it's somewhere in the 40s. Our
40s?
daughter's 47.
It is
Okay.
40. They just had their 40th like last year, I think.
Okay. Seems like 75, right? I mean, they've had 15 seasons of American Idol. So at this point, you're like, anyway. And so a lot of this generation grew up on that stuff when we were younger, but I've seen a lot like with, let's see, I'm 32. And so everything from like 95, no, not everything, but a lot of stuff from like 95 on, that rule where she had where it's like you don't make fun of other people, that seems to me to be kind of out the window at this point if you're doing it in jest. And so like appropriate making fun of, which leads to that confusion of like, are you making fun of them or is it bullying, right? Like that fine line. And so on a lot of shows, like it seems to be like a lot of like rude humor.
Mhm.
And I have to have the discussion of like, we don't talk to people like this. And so for a lot of individuals, like if you're watching those shows or things like that, or your parents are talking to you about the rules, it's not necessarily geared to older, like, I mean, no one teaches you how to be a parent, right? Or the social expectations of what it is to be a parent. We're all just kind of winging it and hoping for the best, right?
But don't we learn that by the time we're 5 or 6? Because our adult personality is actually mostly formed by then. I mean,
So I can't tell you much for personalities because sociology, not psychology. But I would assume that you would know that that's the case. So sociology believes that a lot of people learn how to parent, how their parents parented them, because there's no, like, they give you a what to expect when you're expecting, but so much happens that you're like, who has time to sit down and read a book, right?
It'll be another 15 years.
Right. Those audiobooks, I tell you what, they're a lifesaver for me. But yeah, so a lot of the things that we learn and how we behave are things that we've either been told at a young age or what we've seen around us, how we've been socialized. And so I've talked to a lot of individuals who like to complain about this next generation, and they spend, I have to actually lay down rules for my 13-year-old so he's not like this all day. Because otherwise, like, and so normal socialization that we would have, talking to individuals, how to talk to people, how to engage in conversation, not interrupting people, that was learned through interacting. But with a pandemic this last year, there's a big group of kids who didn't necessarily get that. Like Mara and I have talked about that with our kids, where with my daughter being 18 months, like she's lived almost all of her life with the pandemic of us not really going anywhere. And so that socialization that they would normally get, you know, they're not. And so I'm gonna lovingly say that I have a very wild child. And so as a parent, I then have to be like, hey, don't stand on that furniture and face plant on that other furniture, right? That's our new favorite game. We climb on the ottoman and we jump and we face plant on the couch.
Are we supposed to be stopping that?
I mean, I think at some point it should be like, hey, don't do this at other people's houses, right? But so we learn these rules, right? The next step being, if someone violates those rules, then that would be that deviant behavior. And it's so funny, like, even though some things aren't laws, they're so ingrained in us that it makes you physically uncomfortable when you are in a situation addressing these. Like, it was ingrained in me, grammar. Like, my mom was a teacher, using appropriate grammar, and ain't is not a word, according to my family for the longest time. And so when someone uses the word ain't, I'm like, oh, like my body, I physically like get like little creepy chills. Or learning the manners of like, you don't say shut up to people, like you don't. So even in the video when that little girl said shut up. Like, I'm glad that she expressed that, but the part of me is like, I don't know if at 12 I would have been able to tell somebody to shut up, right? Like, or ask them, can you shut up, please? Right. And so let me flip back to my PowerPoint here.
I want to just also read in the chat. Janice said, do y'all remember Amy Vanderbilt's complete book of etiquette? Any yeses or nos out there? Lois is shaking her head yes.
I think that came out at about 1952-ish.
Was it similar to the video or like more intense?
It was very much more in, you know, the whole thing. Emily Post was another one, but they were pretty much required reading of all young ladies, which I rebelled.
Oh, you deviant, you.
I know.
But
the
I mean,
flip side of that is how, not only how do we respond to deviant behavior, but what are our actions and how strongly we respond. You talked about the fact that kids today don't have a lot of those things that we consider deviant, but they do. They actually do. People and we see it today. I don't know if it's just kids, young adults, Congress, whatever, are, you know, this is a deviant behavior and you are not even allowed to even think that this is something that is all right. If you disagree with me, I get to put you in jail. I get to beat on you. And these things, some of this has been true, you know, this is how many people respond to deviant behavior, but it's just as strong today. If I say, let's see, I think that we're going too fast and trying to get rid of internal combustion engines because we don't really have the technology to change over to a different form of internal power without hurting our economy. All of a sudden, I have people coming down on me like a ton of bricks because it doesn't matter what it does to the economy or people or impoverishing, as long as I don't get to say what I just said. And it's just as, they're just as intolerant on that side.
Yeah, I think that it's both sides. So I think, and
Yes.
this is because I'm on TikTok. I swear to goodness. Okay, TikTok, I learned so much on TikTok, but it is very much like based off of you, right? So I feel like the Gen Z that I see on TikTok is so tolerant, but then intolerant of intolerance. You know what I mean?
They're intolerant of somebody who disagrees with them. And I don't, you know, and you know me, Mara, you know I'm not intolerant.
Well, I think that it's both sides, just like we are, right? Like just like our country is divided. It's the same with that generation, right? So like there are those that are like so open, so loving, like let's change. And then you have well, that's not how I was raised. So I think it's
no,
both.
Mara, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
they're saying, yeah, let's change, but they don't, but they're just as intolerant of somebody says, hey, wait a minute, you don't need to change everything. When I was 20, I wanted to change everything.
Yeah, and then you get tired.
No, well, then you get smart and you said, oh yeah, well, it wasn't possible to change things then.
Yeah.
It's always,
I
some
think
things were possible, some weren't.
I do think we're on the same page, Joyce. I really do. I do. I just think like,
yeah,
you know, I'm in my 30s too. And there are times where I can't help myself but be like, ugh, this younger why do they, but it's about the stupidest things. I'm like, why do they want baggy pants again? I already went through this and it was terrible. Like,
just like, well, and when the big hair comes back, then you'll know things are repeating.
Well, they're doing middle parts right now, and I just don't understand. Okay, like it can't work for me, and I can't do it, and I'm just gonna have to be old, and that's all there is to it.
Every
But-
generation has this with the younger generations where you're like, I want to tell you what I've learned. The younger generation's like, I don't want to listen to you. What do you know about life? And you're like, I literally just did this. I just did this.
Or I did it 50 years ago.
Right.
Mhm. Oh, we've got Janice with a hand raised. Go ahead, Janice.
So one of the things that we're still struggling with, and it has to do with what was considered deviant behavior, is interracial dating, marriage, all of that. And I grew up in the South. And, you know, when you look at things, you know, I was born in 1954. It took the state of Virginia until 1967 to allow interracial marriages. So, you know, it's some of the quote deviant or deviance is so ingrained for so many generations. And clearly the 15th Amendment did nothing to correct that.
That actually leads nicely into my deviant then, acceptable now slide. Let me shimmy back over there. So again, acceptable-ish because depends on where you're from, who you are, generation that you're in. Overall, the idea of individualism. So there was a lot of conformity in previous generations where it was encouraged that everyone, you know, the nail that sticks out gets hit the hardest, or, you know, like now it's more acceptable where it's like, maybe that's just them. Like, I have a giant pet peeve for people being late, like a giant pet peeve. My brother has always been late, but then he married his wife, and then she was a late person, and now they're even more late. Now they have 2 kids and she's pregnant, so it's like, we're gonna tell you noon, so you're here by 1. And so, but also accepting like that is how they are, and then making adjustments for it, versus like if someone's slightly different, like then they're weird and they're out there, right? So motorcycles, this was like the epitome of James Dean, bad boy, subculture, counterculture, right? Like, but now motorcycles, like, you don't think that somebody is deviant, they get off a motorcycle and this cute little old man like takes off his helmet and wanders into the convenience store, right? Like, what we deem to be like things that connected with certain groups that we deem to be deviant are kind of, it's shifting. So women in the workplace, single women have always been, you know, able to work, but married women, the idea that women working outside of the home when they have children. So my dissertation is on family gender roles and women in grad school and things like that. And so it's interesting when looking at how all these other topics tie into this. And so there's multiple viewpoints in terms of like, who should be caring for kids, who should be working, who should be doing what. And so it was seen as deviant to be a working mom there in like early 80s-ish when that shift was coming around. Like before that, it was like moms were at home, they took care of kids. But even now, like to the shift now, it's with this younger generation conversations that we've had in class, they see it almost as like against the norm to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I'm all about you do whatever works for you. That's my type of feminism, where it's like you have the right to choose whatever you want to choose, whatever works for you. Like, but it's just been interesting, like that shift from my grandparents' generation to where we are now. Homosexuality. So with and when I talked about the gay rights movement in my previous class, we talked about how what was the saying, Mara? Do you remember, like yellow shirts on Thursdays or something like that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That
I
was like an indicator that someone was gay and that you were
Yeah, I don't know if
coming
it was
out, but
yellow.
not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I had never heard of the yellow shirts on Thursday. Have any of you heard of the yellow shirts on Thursday? Means that someone's gay? Or that if they have a piercing, excuse me, in a certain ear, that means that they're gay, like, because whatever, right? But there's been more of an acceptance. This is one that has transcended like legal battles to where you used to be able to be fired for being gay. You used to be able to not get married, right? Like, so we've made a shift not only through informal social norms, but through legal, like the formal laws. For some people, they're still kind of like how Jana said, like it's so ingrained in you. For some people, they just feel that it is still wrong because of how they were raised, how they were socialized, whatever. But as a society as a whole, it's definitely become less deviant. Thanks, Freddie Mercury. The concept of like sex before marriage or pregnancy outside of marriage. I could not tell you how many times I got the don't have a baby till you're ready. And by ready, that means like married speech growing up. My dad eventually shortened it to getting pregnant might ruin your life, Callie. Okay, aggressive, right? Then I went to go have a baby and I'm like trying to mentally wrap my head around because it's been a deviant behavior for so long. Like being like, oh, now I can have a baby. Now it's socially acceptable, right? When I was told for years, like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it,
Yeah,
right? Like,
I had the same
back to your
experience, Callie, that like, I was married and pregnant, and I was like, oh, this is okay. This is okay. Okay.
right, right, because it flipped from being like not at all acceptable to okay, now it's acceptable, and you're like, oh, with a whole just like a ceremony, like now you can do all these things, right? Now it's socially expected of you. So it used to be people would need chaperones for dates, right? Like the idea that if a woman is alone with a man, like God forbid that they be accused of kissing them or having any sort of relation. Versus now, like it's not uncommon for my generation, the younger generation, to be like sex before marriage. Like, okay, like I've heard some people advise, like, hey, test the car before you buy it, right? Because what if it's a lemon, right? Like I've heard that, like, and just comments like that where I'm like, I can't imagine my grandparents saying anything like that because it was so taboo. And with oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, I feel like it's still pretty deviant. I mean, I agree with you that it's like more accepted, but I think it depends on your community.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Like it seems like more religious conservative areas, like it's still a big no-no. And so this is going to depend again, culture, society, right? Like, because those are going to be different areas. Little Jimmy from small town Lawton is going to be different than, Holly who lives in New York, right? And then so I added pregnancy outside of marriage because I know quite a few women actually who have gone through like artificial insemination and they're single mothers who made the choice to go have a child because they wanted a child and whether they didn't want a relationship or they were dedicated to their career or whatever else. That's seen as more socially acceptable than because you can break this up. That's seen as more socially acceptable because it was a choice compared to if you accidentally got pregnant, right? That's still seen as kind of taboo. It's more acceptable, but it's still seen as deviant. Joyce, is your hand up here?
Yes. I was going to say, well, I'm 72 is what I am. So I'm a whole different generation. But my mother would say things like, why buy the cow if the milk is free? That was her thing to say.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of those, like make them buy the cow before they get the bacon, or make them buy the pig before they get the bacon, like just different. that one seemed a little bit more morbid because like,
It's fun to be thought of as a cow or a pig. That's fun.
I know.
Oh, yeah, well, just life is interesting. That's all.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
is.
I think those phrases are long lasting, Joyce, because
Mhm.
I heard those too.
Yeah.
And it's funny because those were mostly told to women. Like they weren't necessarily telling the men like, save your milk, right? So they can buy the cow, right? Like men weren't getting the same speeches.
Yeah, well, part of that is because it's like you say, once you're married, you didn't get a job. Well, Bob wasn't that way. He was happy for me to go. But I became a school teacher because that was basically what was all there was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, school teachers, nurses, secretaries, like some of those available to the women jobs that they saw at the time.
But the men were the ones out making the money and could buy something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I bought my house. Well, I put in an offer on a house before I bought this house. That was 2016, and I bought it like wasn't married or anything like that. And she was like, "Is your husband gonna sign off?" I'm like, "I'm not married." She's like, "What about your father?" I'm like,
What?
"I'm."
Huh?
Let's see, I was like 28. I'm like, I don't need anybody else to sign off on this. She's like, "Okay, single woman." Like she made a big production about it, and I was kind of like, okay. Or it's one of those where it's like, yes, women can own houses now. Crazy, crazy concept, right? But it was also seen as deviant for a woman to be too independent for a long time there, because if you were too independent, then you wouldn't need a man. Well, I don't need my husband anyway. And I like to tell him that I don't need you. I like to have you around. Like, don't screw that up, right? Like, but it was definitely seen as deviant for a woman to go out and do those independent things.
Well, that's what I taught my kids though, is become independent. I have one daughter and one son. I told my son, learn how to cook because you don't want to have to get married just because you can't cook.
Right.
And I taught her be able to get a job and support yourself because you don't want to have to get married just because you have to have somebody to bring money in.
Mm-hmm. And it's good because then sons marry somebody like me, and I don't do much with the stove. It's used for storage.
Just always check the oven, like
Right.
that lady on the middle, she stores her quilt. Frankie, she stores her quilt in the oven. And every now and then somebody turns the oven on without checking.
Oh my goodness. Janice wrote in the chat, when I was in elementary school, they had just started to allow married women teachers. However, you could not teach once you became pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, and even pregnancy itself was seen as deviant. So going out in public, like when you were pregnant, was seen as almost shameful. Like, we don't need to see women in that condition.
Yep.
Like,
is that breastfeeding too today? Do you think, you know what I mean? Like people don't see breastfeeding women in public.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's literally what they're for. But hey,
it's whatever, people can do whatever they want, but like I feel like it's ingrained in me that I like can't do that.
Right. I was fully ready to. I was ready to be deviant and be like, say it to me. Like it was one of those where it was like, because I wanted to be an advocate for those who wanted to do it, who weren't as outspoken as I am, because I'm rather outspoken. I wanted to help like pave a way for them. And even now, like if I see a woman breastfeeding, I'm like doing a great job. Like, or even really any person with a kid, I'm like, you're doing all right. We're all in this together. Tantrum at the grocery store, you're like, I got you. What do you need? Like, and it's funny because I flew with my daughter to Cleveland 2 weeks ago. I flew by myself with a toddler on an airplane, which was not the best choice I've ever made. We only got by the help of the very nice people. My favorite one was this lovely Indian woman who I got off the plane, and she was like, "You need help. Give me her." And I was like, okay, like And so she took my daughter as I tried to set up the stroller, like, but even like the idea of women traveling, like women caring for children is not deviant, but me traveling with her, other people were just like, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm all for it. So I had mentioned marijuana use and distribution, how that was seen as, and it's funny because alcohol is not seen as overly deviant. Like we have bars. If you go to a small town, there's at least 3 bars, right? Number of bars, number of churches, they usually match up. And so that's also like, that actually causes more problems in terms of like long-term issues, health-wise, things like drunk driving than other drugs do, but it's seen as socially acceptable. Someone's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a drink. Like, okay, have a drink, right? But it all depends on where you're raised. So I went to my undergrad in Wayne, Nebraska, and Wayne County is a dry county on Sundays. Like you can't buy any alcohol on Sundays, which for a college kid was not what I wanted to hear. But so that was seen as socially unacceptable. So there's some areas that are still dry on Sundays or dry on different days of the week. Usually it's tied to like religious things, right? So the concept of drinking on Sunday was always like, and then in my head, I was always like, I hope they got the wine for mass early and they didn't need to run out and get another bottle because where are you going to go on Sunday? Right? Because my little deviant brain was like, I hope you don't need booze. I'm a little sassy sometimes. It's fine. Tattoos and piercings. So women having pierced ears has been socially acceptable, but the cartilage or nose or eyebrow or lips or belly button or anything else, like those were seen as like the like deviant behavior. Like you were a bad girl or a bad guy if you had these piercings or a tattoo, right? Like you were either seen as deviant because you have a tattoo, or it was military service. Those were tied in a lot, or like sailors got them a lot too. And so it's that notion now that tattoos are becoming more acceptable as long as they're appropriate, right? There's been a lot of push for tattoos not to cause a problem for people who want to get hired for jobs or things like that. And so most of the people that I know have at least one tattoo, even those who are deemed professional, right? Or upstanding members of society. I would like to think that I'm a classy, upstanding member of society, but I have my belly button pierced and I have 2 tattoos. And so, and it's also deviance in terms of like placement. Neck tattoos are still seen as fairly deviant, right? But if it's under clothes, then it's seen as more acceptable. And so while things are deemed more acceptable, there are still stipulations to it. Cosmetic surgery, whether that is liposuction, breast implants, or even things like Botox. Like, I'll be honest with you guys, I get Botox on my forehead. And so here we are, right? Previous generations were like, I'll get it done, but I'm not going to talk about it. Right? Versus my generation's like, hey, look at how many wrinkles I don't have, guys. Like, look at that. Look how well it works. Right? Like, and so it's been seen as more socially acceptable. Also depends on the group that you're in. Right? Like my friend group, you want to get something done? Go for it. Right? But I'll talk to my mom about stuff and she's like, oh, like, was there something wrong with whatever body part they have? Like, is that why it needs to be fixed? Because to her, it's like you need a nose job if you have like a deviated septum, not strictly for how it looks, right? Like, oh, they're getting breast implants. Like, oh, did they have breast cancer and had like a double mastectomy, so they have to get them, right? So it's like through the generations, ideas have shifted as far as like acceptability. And then like Janice had mentioned, like interracial relationships. This in urban areas, highly common. Right? Like my parents are in interracial relationship. My mom's Hispanic, Mexican, my dad's white. They're in Omaha. And technically, I suppose I would be in an interracial relationship with my husband. I'm Mexican. Like I'm tan now, so you can tell. And he's white, and it depends on the interracial relationship, right? Like, and where you are. So in the South, Black-white relationships are going to be a lot more contentious, like how society views them, than maybe someone who's Black and Hispanic, right? Or someone who is Hispanic and Asian. And a lot of those tie into historical situations. I haven't seen the movie Loving, but it's on my to-do list, about that first interracial couple and how that law came to where it's like you can marry somebody of a different race. It used to be legally you couldn't, right? And so some things move from society being like, we don't agree with this, into law. But then it goes the other way where society might be like, we're okay with it, but the laws have to catch up with it, right? And that, I think, is what we're facing with a lot of stuff now. So gay marriage was legalized in 2015. And so, but it took society to be like, hey, we're all right with it for the most part. Like, as a majority, cool, you guys can be miserable too sometimes, right? Like, I'm just kidding, not all marriages are miserable. But having that influence of society on these things. And so, okay, who is deviant? Like, that's always the question, right? Of like, who are these deviant people that I need to be looking out for? Frankly, anyone can be deviant, and most people are in one way or another. Whether that means that you speed, whether that means that you do something that's against a social norm, whether you mean to or not, right? Like, it's technically considered rude or against social norms to interrupt somebody when they're speaking, right? But sometimes we just do it on accident. And there are so many social norms and expectations that change in different places that you're at. At some point, you're bound to violate one, whether you mean to or not, right? Like, I'm sure most of you have jaywalked, or, like I said, speeding, or other illegal things that I can't think of, threw your gum out the window, right? Like, and there are some places that have ridiculous laws where it's like, you can't ride a horse through town on Saturdays, or like, and there are a lot of laws like that. And I had a list and I couldn't remember. I'll look that up for next time. Ridiculous laws that are technically deviant, but aren't really like deviant, because who rides a horse anymore? And if you're riding a horse on a Saturday through town, I think I have more questions than it being illegal behavior, right? But if we look at individuals, so for most adolescents who engage in criminal
I'm just
behavior,
gonna tell them about Wyoming.
Huh.
oh, go ahead, Joyce. I saw you raise your hand.
We used to live in Wyoming. And trust me, there are a lot of people riding on horses. They'll ride them right into the bar Saturday night.
Can you get a DUI on a horse? What are the rules about that?
I don't believe so, because it's the horse that's doing the driving, so to speak.
Right.
Unless your horse is drunk. I
Oh.
suppose that's why they do it.
They probably gave the horse a ticket for going into the bar.
No, they
By the
didn't.
long face.
No, they didn't. Hey, if that's what you want to do. But yeah, we
Right.
lived in Wyoming. Horses were just fine. Are fine.
Interesting. I mean, that would have been nice when I was 21, like, to ride back from the bar on a horse. At least if I get lost, I'm on my horse. Like, you know how to get home, Nessie? All right, let's go. Right?
Exactly.
You can also get a
Let me say
DUI.
this about horses in Wyoming. I had 2 students, and when their time was done for their rotations in pharmacy, my wife and I took them to a place to eat. And the big event was, we came across where they were running cattle along the road, and we had to stop because they wanted to see the cowboys. They were about their age, mounted on horses.
They were watching them right away. It reminded me that it was great to be young.
Yeah.
Watching those tight little, yeah, it was great. loved being around those young people. Watching those tight buns On
I
the
was waiting to
horse.
see how descriptive she was gonna be.
Uh, oh, sorry,
I love
I just
it.
got to tell you about Wyoming. No,
Do you need a
everybody's gonna
minute,
move to
Joyce? Do you need to
Wyoming.
hold on? Do you need a?
Yep,
I always joke that I love lawn boy season. Like
yes.
when they start to go mow the lawns, like they get the college kids that are out mowing the lawns without their shirts on. And I'm like, lawn boy season.
Yeah, well, well, they use those muscles, to hold on.
Right,
So-
right.
Listen, you guys, wrap it up. Come on.
Okay, wrapping it
All
up.
right.
We're all deviant.
It is technically deemed deviant behavior. I mean, just the idea of an older woman and a younger man, that's been deviant for an extended period of time. Like older men have always been able to go for younger women, but the cougar effect, where the woman is older and the man is younger, is seen as more deviant in our society. So we're just engaging in deviant behavior during our deviance class. I mean, I could literally tie anything back into my topic that I'm teaching.
I was really impressed. You did great.
That's why I get off in tangents in class. I'm like, I'll bring it back because this is how they connect.
I was worried about deviance at one point. I was working in a prison, and there was a technician, a woman that was a technician, and I had her check my work. I'm a pharmacist, and I was worried about what other pharmacists would say because that wasn't being done. Well, about 5 or 6 years later, somebody else was doing that, and they wrote it up, and they got awards for doing it because now it was a good idea. I mean, what was
Okay.
bad is now 5 or 6 years later is now okay.
Right, right.
But since she was the person that was there that was skillful enough to check what I was doing, I had her do it. I was deviant, but it seemed logical to be deviant.
Right. Excuse me, there is such thing as positive deviance where it's for the benefit of society or individuals that somebody is being deviant.
Well, I was also deviant because well, I was deviant on purpose. They had uniforms. I was in the uniform services, and we had uniforms that we wore when the boss said to wear them. Well, I always made sure I wore something different because I wanted the prisoners to know I was there for them and not I was not there to keep them in the joint. I was there for their health. I was doing the best I could for them. So the guards just thought I was the stupidest person alive, but that's life,
Right. I mean, yeah, but if you do it for the good purpose of them knowing what you're actually there for, then I mean, I'm all for it. Where are the other things so that the prisoners know that you're on their side? It's supposed to be for rehabilitation, not just, but not everybody believes that, unfortunately.
No.
Speaking of criminals, so for most adolescents who engage in criminal behavior, that behavior spikes between the ages of 14 and 17. So when looking at a chart, it slowly increases from, I think they start keeping track of age 8. It slowly rises, and then there's a big spike between 14 and 17, and then it comes back down. And then most of those who are juvenile offenders aren't offending again as adults. There's minimal recidivism as adults. So when looking, and it's actually really interesting when looking at juvenile criminal behavior because of the brain development and things like that, and their ability to their impulse control and other factors that teenagers engage in, they're more likely to engage in that deviant behavior. If you all remember being teenagers and someone tried to tell you what to do, or this is what you were supposed to be doing, you're like, I'm not going to do that because I'm, for whatever reason, I always followed the rules because I don't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I could get in trouble. I just didn't want to disappoint my parents. So as long as they were okay with it.
I'd say something about obeying the rules. The people, when I was in the uniform services, the people that got promoted broke the rules when they saw fit. The people that did not break the rules ever didn't get promoted, but they did. But they were the goody two shoes.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they want the rules to be followed, but then they're, depending on who you are in society, it's deemed acceptable to break the rules. So it's like, as a society in general, we're like, hey, we shouldn't kill other people, right? But then as a society, we're like, oh, but there's war and things like that. So it's like acceptable deviance in these little bubbles, to where it's like, if you're in the military, whether it be in defense of our country, because you were sent out following orders, like there's acceptable deviant behavior, right? Which is funny because acceptable deviant behavior is like an oxymoron, but it is, because like as a society, we deem like, hey, you shouldn't just kill people you don't like. We're having that conversation with my daughter, not the killing. We're in a hitting phase right now where you can't just hit somebody when you're mad at them. Or she likes to bite when she gets really, really mad. So it's like, you can't just bite somebody because you don't want to, or because you don't like what they're doing. And imagine if we didn't follow that social norm, like we didn't teach kids not to hit, what our society would look like if we didn't have these social norms that kept the deviant behavior in check. Imagine just being able to go around and slap whoever made you mad, right? Like that would both be horrible and nice, because I would probably get slapped a lot, and also I'd get one or two out there. And that during childhood and adolescence is when we learn what is considered socially acceptable by society and what we can do or not do based on the feedback that we get from those around us. So we've discussed that quite a bit in our class here. I am going to, well, I mean, we're getting close to time, but I am going to end a little bit early. I'm sure it hurts you guys more to listen to me talk here. But does anybody have any questions or comments or anything so far about what we're talking about with deviance?
I think we've had a great conversation this whole time, so. But I'm
Awesome.
not mad about being done 7 minutes early.
I can go 7 minutes longer next time if you guys really want me to.
I think you're doing great. I think I'm really impressed that you made it this long. So good job.
Me too. I'm gonna go have a cough drop and maybe a nap.
I love that for you. Okay, so next week we will have part 2, and I'll send out, it's the same link, but I'll send out the invitation again. And thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone for the great discussion. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email them. I can always pass them on to Callie, or I'll put her in the email when I send out the link for this class. So okay.
Definitely.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Callie.
Hi, everyone. Go out and do something deviant. Not illegal, just deviant.
Have a fun Memorial Day weekend as well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.